Hello, this is your professor, Stephen Wallen, MBA. All right, we're going to go ahead and look at chapter 1 here, the challenge of economics. Um, Basically, this is where we look at all the fundamental questions. If you ever look at the chapters, there's 5 main things we're going to be looking at that you should have an idea to be able to do at the end of the chapter. Number 1, it'll explain the meaning of scarcity. Okay, know what scarcity is. Define what opportunity cost is. Recite society's 3 core economic questions. Discuss how market and command economies differ. Describe the nature of market and government failure. Okay, so you want to know if you understand the material? That's your checklist. By the time you get done with this, you can do those things. You're good. Okay. Okay, so first thing, why can't we have everything we want? Okay, that's a basic economic question. Quite simply, our wants exceed our needs. Okay, wants are pretty much unlimited because you have varying degrees of wants. You could have very serious wants. You could have wants which are just on a flim and don't mean anything whatsoever, okay? Scarcity is the lack of available resources to satisfy all desired uses of those resources. So what are they talking about here? It's very simple. Because everyone technically has unlimited wants to some degree, everybody can use what's around. And I think that's really crazy when you think about it. I mean, even a rich person, say they own like 8 houses, can still want a 9th house. Okay, you can own 8 cars and still want a 9th car. Okay, and because we have wants which are just ever increasing, okay, they're unlimited to a degree, they're always going to be a scarcity issue. So then you have to balance those wants of individuals with societies, and you have to balance needs as well. There's a whole nother argument that goes into classifying wants versus needs in economics. The main thing here is just people want to do things, and there's going to be competing resources or competing uses for those resources. So for example, let's say water. Maybe you want to drink water, someone else, maybe they want to build a water park. Okay? You can have the same resource, different people needing it for different reasons, and then you got to figure out who gets it, to what degree. Do we split it up? How much do we split it up? What determines how we split it up? Okay, are we doing it by money? Are we doing it by who needs it the most? There's a lot of different questions you can do with that, okay? Overall, though, because there's a limit, you have to make a choice. Even for you yourself, you have scarcity of resources, and we'll look at those in the future, okay? As we go through this. Economics is a study of how to best allocate scarce resources among competing uses. Now, when you look at this, I want you to target this word, best. Not always fair. Economics is not fair. It's the best, which is a compromise between fair, between efficiency, between all the other things we want in an economic system. It's a compromise. And some of these compromises are not that great. Okay, some of them are not done very good. Some of them lean more towards efficiency. Some lean more towards fairness. And there's a lot of different ways you can work an economic system. And all the system does is allocate the scarce resources based on competing uses, based on all the different things people want to use them for and how they want to use them. As an individual, your resources are time and money. Okay? These are the resources you personally have to influence the economy and to influence the things that you need. Okay? They're basically the things that you can sell to other people. You can give other people your money, give other people your time, and in return, get resources. Society's resources are the factors of production. Excuse me. All right. Society's resources are the factors of production. Inputs used to produce goods and services. So basically, everything you have boils down to these factors of production. Anything you produce, to some degree, you need land. I mean, even if it's an internet company, the servers have to be somewhere. Okay. Labor. You're going to have to someone work on the project. Capital. Capital would be all the equipment, tools, and money that allows them to do it, and financial backing. Entrepreneurship is interesting. It used to be back in the day, they just did land, labor, capital, but entrepreneurship is one they've been focusing on more in the economic source, where it's like you just need someone to manage all 3 of those other resources. Someone has to manage the land, manage the labor, manage the capital. You have to have an entrepreneur to some degree. Okay? And somewhere in there, someone has to be managing it, whether it's one person or a group of people. And if it's not managed, those resources don't work and form themselves together very well. Okay. Every decision regarding the use of resources causes a trade-off. Ooh, it sounds like we're getting into something. What are we going to get into? You probably guessed it by now, opportunity cost, okay? For example, there's a benefit and cost of attending school. You have trade-off doing something else with your time for school. So anytime you do something, you have a trade-off of what else you could have done at that time. In addition, between just your time, you have the costs evaluated. Okay, so for example, if I went to a movie theater, I have 2 hours to go to a movie theater plus whatever the movie ticket price is. So it could be $8, $10, whatever, versus reading a book. Okay, reading a book could be free if it's from the library. If I had to go buy that book, that could also have other trade-offs in there. Okay. This is the way they define it is interesting. Okay, so it's not. They have a very specific scope. An opportunity cost is the most desired goods and services that are foregone, the value of the next best alternative that could have been selected. So there's a lot of alternatives you could do. Okay, you could have slept, you could have gone weeding, you could have done a lot of things besides going to the movie theater, but they want to know what your next best one, what choice you thought was the closest. Okay, because really you have almost infinite trade-offs to a degree based on the scenario, where you can go through and label all the different stuff possible. But they want to focus on the next best one. What things did you narrow it down to, and were you really deciding between? Okay. Individuals in society make choices by weighing the expected benefit against the opportunity cost. Well, what are we really talking about here? I mean, the thing that's interesting too with our choices, it's the expected benefit when we make it. When we make choices, for the most part, we're always thinking we're making the best choice. In 2020, had we known what the actual results would be, we would have done something different. Okay. And so we're just weighing what we think's going to happen. We don't know what's going to actually happen, and sometimes we make very poor choices in economics because of this, okay? Because we don't have future sight. Okay, here's the three main ways we look at our economic system. Every nation has to answer these, okay? What to produce, how to produce, for whom to produce. What to produce is really interesting. As a nation, when you look at all the nations in the world, you want to say, what does our nation do well, and what factors do we have that make us be able to do that very well? Let's look, for example, some countries like Venezuela, Russia. There's a couple other ones. The one thing they do really good is raw resources. Gas production is what their entire economy is based on because they have a lot of it. They do a lot of crude oil and things like that. The only problem with that, though, is if you're focusing only on one specific thing and that market goes down, you're going to be hurt big time. Okay, and also if there's trade sanctions against you, it's very easy to hurt you because you're looking at exporting if you're into raw resources for a large part of your economy. And you can contrast that with other countries that are more developed, like for example Japan. They don't have that much land compared to other countries. What they do have is a very skilled, educated workforce, and ever since America came in there after World War II and got them going again, they were able to produce very high-end goods as far as refining things into technology, making things better in electronics, cars, you name it. They're selling more of the end product goods. Okay. How to produce is very interesting as well, because not only what are you producing, but how are you going to produce it? Okay. Who controls the resources? Like, is it going to be government controlled? Is it going to be privately controlled? Is it going to be a mix between the two? How are you going to produce it? Okay. And for whom? Okay. Whom to produce. So once we have all these productions going on and we get all of our goods at the end, who gets the bounty? Okay. And then we're going to look at, like, well, are we going to give it to who contributed more to producing those goods? Are we going to give it more to who needs it more? Or are we just going to give it to who figured out how to suck wealth out of the system? Because there's a lot of people who don't produce very much, but they've figured out how to suck wealth out of the system, and they can get a whole lot of the goods and resources. Okay. And so we have to look at this and say, well, what do we value? Are we valuing people's needs? Are we valuing what they've put forth? There's a whole lot of arguments in there. So, but every country has to face these. That's the main. These are the three questions every country, every nation has to face these and figure out what to do. Economic system answers these fundamental questions. Okay. There aren't enough resources in the economy to produce all the goods and services desired by society. So just like how we as individuals can't have what we want, societies can't have what they want. Okay, they don't have unlimited production. Okay, they have finite production. They have finite resources as far as what they can deal with at the time. And so they got to figure out, what do we want to do most? And look, surprise, surprise, we decide what we want most. We sacrifice less desired activities and goods. It just says you as a person has opportunity costs. Our nation, our society has opportunity costs as well. Okay. This is where we start getting into more of the math and kind of understanding what's going on. So the production possibility curve, they short term it as PPC, describes the alternative combinations of goods and services that could be produced. Okay. Available resources and technology in a given time period. Normally it's just two resources being measured on a graph. Okay. And then in between you have all your different possibilities. Let's take a look at this. Okay. So first, when you look at this graph, consumer goods is on the left. Okay. When you look at the bottom of this graph, military goods are on the right. Okay. So if I was to produce on the line that's going vertical, I'm producing only consumer. But if I was to produce on the military goods at the very bottom of the graph and only produce on that and not go anywhere up, then I'll be producing only military goods. Okay. So right here, maximum output of consumer goods. If I was to produce there, I'm producing 100% of my resources are going to go towards making consumer goods. Which means if 100% of my resources are going towards consumer goods, what do I have for military output? 0. Okay. Vice versa, I could put everything into military goods. I could produce at where B is right there. And how much would I get for consumer goods? Well, if I'm putting everything into military, I'm going to have 0 on consumer goods. Now, most countries don't do this. Most countries have what's called a mix. Okay, we have a mix of what we produce whenever we're comparing two things. And then we go through and look and see what these mixes are. Okay, so we could produce at point C, where we get a lot of consumer goods and a little bit of military goods. Or we could go to point X, where we give up some consumer goods, even more consumer goods, and we gain a little bit more military. Okay, and that gives us the maximum combinations of goods. So all of our combinations are going to be on that line that are potential combinations. And remember, this is if we're producing at full capacity, okay? Sometimes we have that line of where we could be producing, and we produce under that line. That means we're just not producing correctly, okay? This is, if we're producing on that line, we're assuming we're using all of our resources efficiently and to the max possible. At which point, even at the max and using everything efficiently, we still have trade-offs. And if you want to know what you're losing when you go on that line, let's say I'm going from A to C. Well, if I go from A to C, which is that maximum consumer goods, and if I go to C, I'm giving up a little bit of those consumer goods. I go from A to D as far as what I'm giving up on consumer goods, but I'm gaining from all the way there in the corner. You're going to see from O to E, that's how many military goods I'm gaining. So you start at A, and you go from A to C to X to B. Each step there on that line, you are giving up consumer goods. And for all the consumer goods you're giving up, you can see how many military goods you're gaining at the bottom. Okay. So this is a good example of basically people trying to figure out what's the right mix. And for each country, it'll be different. Some countries will focus more on consumer goods, some on military goods. So for example, if I did North Korea here, where would North Korea be as far as military goods versus consumer goods? Okay. Well, compared to other countries, they're going to have a lot more on military goods versus consumer goods. And if you look at some other countries, say Jamaica, well, they're going to probably have a lot more consumer goods, a lot less on military. Okay. This can also be represented with a table. Okay. Right here, they have output A, B, C, D, E, F. Okay. At output A, what they're showing you is you have 0 missiles and 100 houses. Okay. That means we're producing only houses, which is a consumer good, is the way they're looking at it. They're giving us essentially an item to represent military goods. We produce 10 less houses, though, okay, we can then produce 50 missiles. Okay, so we only had to give up 10 houses to get 50 missiles when we go to B. So that was fairly efficient. But what happens when we go to C? C, we get 100 missiles, but this time it's going to cost us more. Rather than just giving up 10 houses, it's going to take 15 houses, okay, because we're going from 90 to 75, so that's a 15 house gap. So it's not as efficient going from B to C, but we do get more missiles. And this is what's also interesting too. When we go from C to D, we're going from 75 houses to 50 houses. Well, we're giving up 20 houses, and we're still just gaining the regular 50 missiles. So what's happening with our efficiency? Our efficiency is going down. In fact, each step we go, our efficiency is going down. In fact, we go from 55 to 30. Now we're not giving 25 houses away just to get 50 more missiles. And then finally, from E to F, we give our last 30 houses for the same 50 missiles. Okay? And so in there, it's interesting. We can either, what would be the most efficient? Well, the most efficient would be at B, but we'd have to look and see in value what houses versus missiles are valued at, okay? And as far as raw production, we're looking at it, we're saying, well, that's a good step there, and any other further steps, we're getting less efficiency. But if missiles are valued really high, people might take that hit in efficiency based on what things are valued at, okay? And so the question is, what to produce? Okay, are you going to choose B, which seems to be a fairly good mixture between missiles and houses? Because as you go down, you're not getting as many. You have to give up more houses per the same amount of missiles. Or are you like North Korea, where they don't care? It's like, we want huge military, and we're going to sacrifice a lot of stuff. And even if it becomes inefficient to do so, we want a bigger military. Maybe they're producing at DE. Okay, stuff like that. Right here, they're showing a good combination. Okay, increasing military production requires housing construction to be reduced. Well, we probably talked about that. And basically, we're just moving along the points. So A, B, C, D, E, F. Those would be all the points on that curve, and then you have to pick a mix that you think works for you. Okay. But if you look at this curve, it wasn't. You can see the efficiency is different because of the slope of the line. Okay. And so they're showing you that based on this slope, I'm giving up a little bit of military here, or a little bit of, sorry, not military, consumer goods, but then I'm gaining that amount of military, okay? And so all they're showing you on this graph is a way to visualize what you're giving up, which is from C1 to C2, but what you're gaining is from M1 to M2. So whenever you move across this line, you're giving up something, but then you're gaining exactly what's on the opposite side of the graph. That's what you're going to be getting more of, okay? Produce the optimal point. So what's the optimal combination? It can be based on the values of your society. That's what it comes down to. I mean, you can look at the efficiency of it, and also just the values of what you think you need to produce more of, okay? And this is where we're getting to a lot of debates and topics. We're like, hey, we need more military. Well, we have to ourselves, is it more efficient to produce more military? And do we actually need more military in our society, okay? And so it's value judgments. And so the best really comes based on the values. And they're derived from societies. And just from their geopolitical area. I mean, based on who's around you, you're going to produce more military. If everyone around you has a large military, chances are you'll have a large military because you're in more of a threat area. If you're in a low threat area and everyone has low military, you're all going to focus more on consumer goods. So, okay. The selection of an optimal combination depends on part of how future-oriented one is. This is another thing, too. So we looked at the trade-off between consumer and military, okay? Another thing you can look at is just investment versus consumption. Okay, so most economies that are smart increase investments. Okay, what is investment goods? Well, they're going to look at new plants and equipment. That's what they're looking at as far as future production. Okay, new plants and equipment. When you first put a new plant or an equipment in, does it help anyone out immediately? No. It's only once we use those plants to produce the goods in the future. Okay. But what's it allow us to do? It allows us to shift this PPC curve outward, possibility curve outward. And that's when you actually have economic growth. This is the one that's interesting. Economic growth only happens when you produce more. We don't care about what your mix is. If you're producing more military or more consumer goods, we care what you're producing more of, period. And so unless that curve shifts outward, you don't have economic growth. You can move along that curve and get different possibilities, but unless you're shifting the curve out, unless you're growing that curve, you don't have economic growth. And that's why it's important that we look at what we're doing with investment, okay? And also, economic growth, no matter what, it's going to improve living standards because then there's more that you can do with what you have, okay? Right here, they're showing the 1900s. Our technology is kind of low. We have some factories, but we obviously we're not as built up in the 1900s as we are in the future. So what happens? Well, as we put investment into new plants, new production, new technologies, we shift out the curve. That shifting curve is the new production possibility curve in 2016, as far as this graph's concerned, and we're getting a lot more economic improvement. Now, we still have the trade-offs. We can still produce more consumer, more military, but overall, no matter where we are, we can produce a lot more overall, okay? Overall, we can produce a lot more. And that's an actual economic increase. So when you're moving along the line, let's say on the blue line, if you're staying on the blue line, your economy is not increasing. You're just changing your mix of output. You're changing military versus consumer, consumer versus military. But when you actually increase that line due to investments, due to actually building your economy, that's economic growth. Okay. Okay, question 2. How to produce. Question focuses on finding an optimal method of producing goods and services. Okay. For whom we talked about earlier, focuses on the economy's output is distributed across member society. So, again, we divide the spoils, distribution based on productive contributions, distribution based on need, some combination of productive contributions and need. This book is very ideological in that it's hoping that people are getting money based solely on being productive. There's a lot of businesses that are more leech based, that aren't producing much, but they gain a lot. Okay, and that's sort of the one thing that a lot of people start figuring out. They're like, hey, there's some times when your production is correlated with what you earn. There's sometimes when it's like you're more of a black market type entity, and even though you're causing problems for society, you're gaining a lot of money. Okay, and there can be lots of like you used to have protection rackets back in the day with the mob. The mob would go around to people's businesses, say, hey, you want your business to do well, pay us protection money. What are they paying the money for? The mob itself doesn't destroy their business. Okay, but ideologically, we're hoping that people are getting paid based on what they produce. Okay, and then we have distribution based on need, where it's like people need things to survive, and also not only that, they need things to grow. Okay, if we only give people based on what they're producing, sometimes we need to give people what they need now so they can produce more in the future. Just so like we invest in society, it's worth investing in people a lot of times if it pays off. But we got to make sure we're actually doing that investment correctly, because just as you can misalign your investments in society and do investments that don't pay off, you need to make sure that when you invest in people, those people are held to those investments as well, and that they're actually going to become more productive people and do more if that's the reason that you're investing in them. Okay, but most of societies, it's a combination. Okay, you look at this and say, hey, people have needs. People need to be able to survive. We want people to be able to grow and be able to move up economically. We want them to, and that lets them contribute more. That helps our society overall, and also people need to be rewarded for what they do. And so there's some combination, and it's all based on that society as far as how that combination goes. Distribution based on need rather than work effect may result in less work effort. Oh, that's true. Okay. They've seen this a lot of times in the communistic countries where you got paid the same no matter what. So people just showed up. They didn't work very hard. There was no incentive to work hard. This happens all the time when I do consulting. If I pay someone by the project to get something done, it gets done fairly fast because they don't want to waste a lot of time on it, and they'll get it done. However, you do need to put standards in there, because if you don't put standards in there, then their whole thing is getting it done as quick as possible so they get the most amount of money per hour spent on the project. And that's what's really interesting when you look at this. Like, when you have distribution based on need, you do need to have incentive for people to work. But at the same time, I mean, you have to look at some of the things as far as people working and saying, hey, what would you do if you could quit your job? Well, I'd go work at something more meaningful, and I'd be able to maybe contribute more in a way that I feel that I'd be able to enjoy. And so, I mean, you do need that there, but it's not the only reason people work. Okay, it is one of the main driving factors, I'd say, people work is so that they can get money to survive. But there are a lot of other things we look for in work. We look for, does work help? Do I think I'm contributing to society? Some people like to contribute to society. They feel like their work is needed. Like if you're a doctor or a nurse. Am I good at my work? Does my work build me up? Do I feel satisfaction when I'm actually working? Okay. And so when we look at all these things, it's like it's very important that we do have a link between what you produce and what you get, so that people actually do work. But it'd be naive to think that's the only reason people work. Okay, I'd say it's a big reason. I mean, we always hear about the person winning the lottery and then they quit their job the next day. But the question is, what about the people who win the lottery and don't quit their job the next day? That'd be something to look at. Okay. There'll be less output to distribute. That's the other thing they say. If people are no longer not incentive to work, well, that production possibility curve is going to go back. And so then you have this recessive trend where people are not working as much, so they're getting paid based on need, and then you just have less overall to distribute. Okay? And that's what they're talking about. The size of the pie will be smaller. Every choice involves conflicts and trade-offs. Okay? There's conflicts, there's trade-offs. Sometimes you bring morality in there. Sometimes you bring just math in there. It depends on the economist and what they're bringing in there, and you as a person, how you're viewing the situation. More of one good implies less of another. This is one thing that tends to hold true because you're using resources up. Therefore, you're going to have less of another. Now, what other processes are there? Well, we're going to talk about the market mechanism. Many basic economic decisions can be made through the political process using the market mechanism. Okay. Basically, they're just saying the market has sales and prices. When they have these, they send signals to producers about what mix of output consumers want. So if things are selling high, and they can look at it and say it's cheap to produce, that's a signal we need to produce more of this in the economy, and people start moving to produce more of that good. Okay, we see it all the time, as far as, like, for example, any booms or trends, you'll see people moving in saying, "Is there a lot of money to be made on that?" I mean, even something like a Pogs back in the day, it's cardboard, circles of cardboard. It was a trend. People saw that they were cheap to produce and they were selling high during that period. People moved in to fill that. Okay. And you'll see that in all markets. People move into markets based on how easy it is to get into the market, based on how saturated the market is, and based on how long they think it's going to be worth being in that market as far as the margin of profit that can be obtained. Okay. And also, you do have expertise of companies that does also change where you move in. No direct communication between buyers and sellers. This is what's really nice about the market. I don't need to go to people and take a poll about how they feel about a product. How do you feel about bread? How do you feel about broccoli? No, I just look up there and say, what is this currently selling for? What are people currently willing to sell and buy this for? And what happens if it's not getting bought or sold, that's going to change the price to go up or down. And that kind of relates to how much people feel it's actually worth. They're putting a price on it. Sellers are putting a price on it based on what it takes to produce. Buyers are putting a price on it based on how much is out there and how much they feel it helps them. So, I mean, it does a really good job of communication without having to do a lot of survey and information work. Okay. Oftentimes been described as the invisible hand, which means, hey, if there's someone buying something, they're going to seek out someone who sells it. If someone's selling something, they're trying to find people who'd be interested in buying. And through these markets, people start finding each other and they start doing transactions. And these transactions keep occurring. And people, as there's more buyers or more sellers, the prices change to signal what's going on. Laissez-faire. Okay, if you ever heard the term laissez-faire, it just means leave it alone. Let the market decide everything. Okay, this is like no government intervention whatsoever. Our economy does not work this way. We might have some laissez-faire in it, but it is not 100%. Market does whatever it wants. Okay, and that means in a true laissez-faire market, what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce is completely based on the market. Okay, there is no intervention whatsoever by the government, and it can flourish, but also it can die just as fast. I mean, it's very tends to go very fast because there's no restrictions. There's nothing slowing down the market, but at the same time, there's nothing preventing the market from going off a cliff. Okay, and we have seen that in some markets where they get over leveraged, and then we all pay for it. So laissez-faire is good when it works, not so much when it doesn't. All right, and of course, Adam Smith, 1776, promoted laissez-faire economics. Central planning. Okay, this is the other thing you can do. And remember, these are extremes. Okay, is the doctrine of everyone needs would be fulfilled. What to produce, how to produce, for whom to produce. Maybe the government. Government just says, hey, what do people generally need? All right, well, we're going to produce X amount of this, X amount of this, X amount of that. The problem with this, though, is when you're planning something, sometimes your plans are not what people actually need. And then that gap causes an issue. We might have oversupply, which means we have a lot of goods that we produce a lot extra of that people don't really need or care for. And also we could have shortages in other goods, therefore, where people really want it and we don't have it there at that time. Okay. This goes on Karl Marx, Das Kapital, 1867, promoted communist economics. And so economies that use both market and non-market signals to allocate goods and resources are mixed economies. So what economy is the U.S.? We are a mixed economy. It's just that simple. We have government regulation, and the market and the government decides what to produce, how to produce, for whom to produce it. Now, does the market have a lot more pull and production power as far as what they want to produce here in the U.S. than some other countries? Yeah, it all depends on how much the government's involved. So think of it as a big giant scale, okay? You have extremes at one point, and every economy is going to, for the most part, be a mixed in the middle. And the question is, where do you lean towards? Are you at a 75? Are you at an 85 towards going straight to the government, or are you like a 20 and you're going more towards just where for free market? I mean, it's a sliding scale. Okay, and that's what it says right here. Most things today are mixed because we found out it doesn't really work to have the government completely in charge. Doesn't work to have the market completely in charge. But the question is, what's the best mix for us? How much should the government be involved? Okay. Markets do not always produce the right combination of output. This is where we get into the definitions. Markets do not always produce the right measurement. We call this market failure. It occurs when the market minimum does not generate the best possible. Okay, this happens. So if we leave things up to the market and the market fails, that's market failure. Okay. In the presence of market failures, government intervention may be necessary. So when all the banks had big issues because of the big foreclosure crisis in 2008, because all the housing and everyone made really terrible bad loans and people were buying houses on just speculation, the market couldn't help itself. They're like, there was money to be made, so they were incentive to keep going into this downward spiral till finally they put so much pressure on the market and realized, hey, these buyers don't have money to make payments and these houses are artificially inflated. Bam, the market blew up. Okay, so who'd they turn to? The government. Okay, it says government intervention may be necessary. There are smaller issues which maybe the market can heal itself. Larger issues may need government intervention so that we can keep going and we don't get into even further spirals of depression and regression. The thing is, it's sort of like the domino effect. Have you guys ever seen the domino effect? When one thing goes down, other things start going down. So the government has to get in there and try to put its hand in the middle of the domino and say, hey, we need these to stop going down, and then the market can recover to a degree, but we're going to try and stop the dominoes from continuing to go down. Okay. And the thing is, it says that maybe. So sometimes you don't have to. Okay. Government failure. Government failure occurs when government intervention fails to improve economic outcomes. So let's say in 2008, the government came in and made it worse. Okay. When the government comes in and makes things worse, then it's a government failure. So then you have a market failure on top of a government failure. Okay. And I think it's interesting. It says fails to improve. It doesn't necessarily have to make it worse. If it doesn't even make it better, because it always takes resources for the government to come in. If they come in and it doesn't help at all, it's also a loss because it took resources for the government to go in there in the first place. Okay. Government will not necessarily offer better answers than the market mechanism. Okay, this is what's always interesting. Because what happens is sometimes you get into a spiral where people are like, well, the government was the ones that bailed us out, and the markets are the ones that caused the problem. Therefore, we just need to get rid of all the markets. Well, no, you're going to another extreme again. And so you need to look at this and say, what's the best balance for us? Well, maybe we just need to regulate this so that it doesn't happen again, but the markets for themselves seem to move a lot faster than if the government was in charge of everything. But if we have enough guides and safety and regulations for things that are important, things can move and the market doesn't destroy itself. Okay. The study of economics divides into macroeconomics. Okay, study of aggregate economic behavior. So aggregate just means everything, basically. Okay, that's what an aggregate is. When you look at an aggregate, you're looking at a whole picture, and it's of the economy as a whole. So I'm not really worried about one industry at all. I just want to know, is the U.S. producing more in general? So when you look at that PPC curve back in the beginning, I don't care if we're producing more military, more of the others. I just want to know, is that thing moving out? Are we getting more overall production as the main thing? I'm not looking at small market segments to a degree. Okay. Microeconomics, however, is the study of individual economic behavior. Is of the components of large economy. You look at individual markets. If you want to split this even further, this book's a little bit outdated as far as a lot of the terms I'm seeing now in a lot of books. They have neuroeconomics even. That's a field that's opening up where we're literally looking at the decisions of one person. Okay, so you have macro, which is the nation. Micro, you're looking at industry segments. Neuro, we want one person. Why are you buying and selling as a person? Okay, and they're all connected to a degree. So this is what's interesting. The economy is too vast and too complex to describe and explain. Therefore, we have economic models. Okay, a model is not the economy. The model is where we take certain assumptions. So we have basic relationships to explain the economic events and formulate economic policies. There are so many pieces moving in the economy that all you can do is use a model that says this will pertain to probably 80% of what's going on. But even if we only know 80% of what's going on, or 90% of what's going on, we know this would be a good thing to use, and we can predict with a fair amount about what's going to happen. Okay. And so we have to use a model. And also, like they said, there's a lot going on. Even though you're looking at a model as far as when we do problems in class or things like that, it's a restricted model, meaning we're not allowing other things that are going on behind the curtains to affect what you're currently doing. But in real economics, everything's moving at once. Okay? That's why you'll always see this thing on any problem you work on. Ceteris paribus is the assumption that relationships within the model do not change. Okay, so that means we're going to set up a model and we're going to make it somewhat static. There's not things that are mysteriously affecting you from nowhere that you don't know about. Okay, we're saying based on only what you see and what you can control, what's going to happen. Okay. All policy decisions are ultimately a mix of politics and economic theory. This is what's interesting. Our policy is not based just on economic theory. Politics is a lot of it. We have identity politics. We have values. That's what politics are about. Politics are about values people hold. And economic theory is just what's going to happen based on those values. Okay, these are your values. These are your choices of economic theory, and these are what you're going to get. Okay. This one actually goes about President Obama's made it clear that he believes more government intervention and less market reliance is needed to attain the right of what, how, and for whom to produce the answers. So, I think it's kind of interesting is that even when you shift more towards government in general has been growing over for the past 100 years, and a lot of it's just because of the types of markets we have emerging, and also just because of a lot of the jobs going away because we're more efficient. I mean, we're producing a HUD load more with less workers. That's just all there is to it. So we have to find some place to put those workers. We end up with more management type positions. There's more bureaucracy, more things going on. We're obviously more service oriented than we used to be as a nation. We're just service based. Everything you get for free still has an opportunity. This is what's also interesting. Okay, you can tell if someone has some idea of economics if you say, okay, what's the opportunity cost of going for a walk? Well, I could take a nap. Both options are technically free, and then as far as costing money, but the opportunity cost is what you could have done. Okay. So nothing's technically free. You still spend time, and then your time is based on what activity you chose. So right there's a good identity thing to see if people actually understand opportunity cost. It's not just, well, am I going to buy this versus that? It's like, no, I could have done a nap versus a walk, and they cost the exact same. They're both technically free, but the opportunity cost is doing the other action. And then also here they talk about resources being consumed as well. And then it goes into a summary. This is it. Scarcity, opportunity cost, what, how, for whom to produce, okay? Market versus command economies, and market versus government failures. Remember, market is when the market causes the issue. Government is when the government comes in and the government's unable to improve it, okay? So those are the type of failures you got going on. And then they go through basic math. We're not going to worry about it. We assume you guys know math, okay? Linear versus non-linear. This is what's also interesting. Correlation is not causation. This is just basic, whether in economics or anything. I can tell you that something's correlated. It does not mean it's causing it, okay? And that basically means, like, you could go over a whole bunch of stuff, but it's very, very simple when you get into the math of it, that correlation is not causation. You actually have to show linked evidence. All right, well, that is everything. You guys take care.